Welcome to 5% Radio, where it's all about learning like no one else today so you can live like no one else tomorrow. Please be sure to share and subscribe. If that's what it takes to be successful, then I don't want to be successful. I can still remember raising my voice at my dad when I was about 12 years old. And, my dad and I are standing in the entryway just outside of the mudroom in the house, just barely in the living room. And him and I are discussing what it takes to be successful. And he basically told me that you've got to be willing to work your butt off. You've got to be willing to work 40, 50, sometimes maybe even 60 hours a week if you want to be successful. And I just didn't agree with that, even at 12 years old. And here's why I tell you that story, because even at 12 years old, even as a young kid, I understood that there had to be, I always had just this, I don't even want to call it a suspicion, but I always had just like this feeling that there had to be more. There had to be another way to do things outside of the traditional path where you just work 40 or 50 hours a week and you just pay bills. And then if you want to do anything else outside of that, you have to work even more hours. And I just always felt like, man, there has got to be more than just this. There's got to be more than just working your life away, because that was how I always felt about working that many hours. I just felt like it was more or less working your life away. And I'm like, there's got to be something else. And I want to give a bit of a disclaimer for today's episode and kind of a warning. There's going to be two different kinds of people after this episode is over. There's going to be, number one, the type of person that believes what I have to say. And the second kind of person is going to be a person that doesn't believe what I have to say, and they're going to go on and continue living like they were before. And I kind of think of the Matrix movie from, I don't know, I think it was super late 90s or early 2000s. And, Morpheus, the mentor, is talking to Neo, the mentee, the person who's actually kind of being led along this journey throughout the movie. If you have not watched it, by the way, let me pause here and say that is your homework after today's episode, is go watch the movie The Matrix. But so in The Matrix, Morpheus gives Neo the option of, okay, you can take the red pill and you can wake up and see everything as it really is, or you can take the blue pill and you can basically remain half asleep. You can continue to live in the fantasy, the fake reality that you currently live in, that most people live their lives in. So there's my warning, there's my disclaimer. You get to make that choice. But if you're still listening, I want to give you one more analogy, because today's content that I'm going to be covering in this episode is kind of like a stereogram. A stereogram is one of those things, you're out in public, you're at a store, maybe you pick up a card and you're looking at this thing and someone's like, hey, do you see, the moose with a monkey on its back? And you're staring at the thing and it's just a big mess. It looks like a little kid ate a bunch of candy and barfed, and someone took a picture of it, and you're like, no, I don't see what you're talking. Like, what do you mean? They're like, no, turn your head, squint your eyes, and if you kind of tilt your head to the side, and you do it, and you do it, and you do it, and you're like, no, I can't see it. And they're like, all right, well, maybe. And they grab your head, they tilt it. You're like, no, I don't see it. And then eventually you see it. Now you cannot unsee the moose with the monkey on its back, or the mountain, or whatever is in the picture that they were trying to get you to see. See, stereograms, you have to look at it just the right way. But once you see it, you cannot ever unsee it. So I want to tell you about what's going on right now in America that most people might not believe. So the average person right now works 90 to 100,000 hours during their lifetime, and by the age of 65 years old, 95% are dead, disabled, or broke. 1% end up actually being wealthy, meaning they have a lot of money, and 4% end up being financially stable, aka they saved enough to live off of in retirement and they're not having to depend on friends and family. On the flip side of that, so if we have people working 90,000 to 100,000 hours of their life, they're working that's average. 95% of the people work those hours and end up dead, disabled, or broke, meaning they're paycheck to paycheck or their social security to social security. They do not have enough money to actually live out their golden years in retirement. The free lunch that everyone is sold, just work a job, take 40 to 45 years, and when you're 65 or 67, 68, you can retire someday and you can live out your golden years blissfully in retirement communities or down in Florida golfing or vacationing, traveling the world. We've all heard this before. Now, on the flip side of that, right now in America, the average college credit hour is $596 per credit hour. To graduate and get a piece of paper, which literally just gives you the right to go out and get a job. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but right now in America in 2023, 60% of people that go to college, that graduate, that spent that money, which comes out to be like $70,000, just for the right to get a piece of paper so you can go apply for a job, work full-time, work 45 years, and then get to the age of 65, and there's a 95% chance that you're going to be dead, disabled, or broke if you made it that far. You're broke to work 45. Okay, so 70 grand for the right to work 40 to 45 years, for the right to retire broke. Last thing, and then we get into today's content. There's something called the 45-year plan. You can look this up. There was a stat put out by the Federal Bureau of Labor and Statistics back in 2018, and normally I would not trust the government, but this was something they had tracked out. So this was put out back in 2018, and pretty much here is what they found out. From the ages of 20 to 30 or maybe 35, people make steady increases in pay. They get raises, things like that. They're moving up the corporate ladder. From the ages of about 35 to 65 when you retire, you get cost of living raises and really nothing else, unless you get some massive promotion. But on average, from the ages of 35 to 65, they tracked out the data because all of us turn our taxes in, so they tracked this out over thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people. And from ages 35 to 65, people working, actively working, trading time for money, actually going to a job like the majority of people do, like 95% of people do, they pretty much did not get raises. You might get a cost of living raise and things like that, but if you got a cost of living raise, let's say you got a 10% raise this year, we just hit inflation that was over 11%, so you are now behind by 1%, even though you got, quote-unquote, a raise, but it's not actually paying your bills. The money's not going any further than it used to. So the 45-year plan, look this up, and then here's the kicker. Once you get to 65 years old, here's where the 95% of people by age 65 are dead, disabled, or broke. Once you get to 65 or 67, whatever the retirement age is, it's moving out further and further. Let's say it's 65 years old for the sake of this example. By the time you get there, your income has dropped down to half to a third of what it was. Now, if you look up the average Social Security check that you will get after retirement at roughly age 65, the average withdrawal that you will get is about $1,800. Let that sink in. Worked 40 to 45 years of my life. The average that I'll get is about $1,800. By the way, the numbers of people that have not saved really anything significant by the age of 40, and you only have 25 years left to work, so you really have very little time for compound interest to actually work in your favor. The number of people that have little to nothing saved yet for quote-unquote retirement is absolutely mind-blowing. I'm not even going to get into the debate of will Social Security be here or not, because people have been saying for years and years and years that it's not going to be around, and it still is. I personally don't think it's going to be around in the next 50 years for people in my age demographic to actually retire if they did work a quote-unquote safe, secure job with good benefits, but that is an entirely different subject. But I just want that to sink in. $1,800 is the average that you'll withdraw on the max if you paid in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Let's say that you had a super high earning, you're a corporate CEO, then you might make $3,600 a month. Look it up. Look up what the lowest is. Look up the average. Look up the highest. I'm not giving you anything that's fluff. This isn't, I'm not guessing. I looked up these stats before today's episodes. But so you work all those years, you live paycheck to paycheck, you make that for Social Security if it's around. And here's the reason why. Here's why things work out the way they work out. It's because 95% of people only control 5% of the wealth, whereas 5% of people or less control 95% of the wealth or more. See, there are basically 4 different ways to make income, and you can really break it down to 2 different ways: active versus passive. There's a saying about money. When it comes to money, you're either the master of it or you are the slave of it. Money is really not that important. I always want to clarify this, and I'm going to reiterate it until I'm blue in the face for this show. Money's not that important, but it is right up there with oxygen. See, I don't think about oxygen every day. I don't come home from being out and I'm like, it's so nice to have oxygen in my house. I don't do that. It's not really that important on my priority list, but I do need it to survive. So that being said, here are the 4 different ways of making money, and here are the differences, and here's why some people end up wealthy at the end of their working life, and some people don't. By the way, I'm also going to get into why some people actually have to work on a daily basis and others don't, because I do have friends and I do know plenty of people that work 1 hour or less a day. I've got friends that work an hour a day, 2 hours a day. They're not day traders. They're not doing stock market stuff. They have built streams of passive income. So here we go, the 4 ways of making money. Number one is an employee. This is someone who trades time for money. That is flat out how they make their money. The vocabulary used by this person might be, I'm looking for a safe, secure job with good benefits, and we're trained 100% to look for this as well as the next way of making money in school. That's what all of our primary education goes towards, is vocational training, aka how to do a task, how to use your time, use your skills and abilities to make money by the hour. Now, the core values of this person are safety, security, and they want a floor. They want good benefits. They want guaranteed income. They're very risk adverse. They want super low risk. They're going to ask questions like, how many paid holidays do we have, and how much do we get paid for overtime? Limitations, though, with this quadrant, there's 4 different quadrants. In this quadrant, the limitations here are it's strictly a time for money trade. See, I don't care who you are. I don't care how smart you are, how hardworking you are, how much you earn per hour. You only have 24 hours in a day. Whereas someone like Bezos makes billions of dollars a month, there's no possible way that he is working any more hours than 20, even if he didn't have to sleep and he's some kind of genetic freak, him and Elon Musk, let's say they don't have to sleep at all. We still all have 24 hours a day. So the limitation here with an employee is that they only can trade time for money. That is the only way they make money. And it's limited because you can only trade so much time before you have to sleep. Even if you're not going to sleep that much, you still have to rest. Now let's talk about the tax situation. The tax situation for employees is the absolute worst. You get no write-offs. In 1943, actually, the federal government passed a tax law that states that the taxes will be taken out of employees' paychecks before they even get the chance to receive them. It didn't used to be that way. You used to pay your taxes after, but now it comes out automatically. A lot of you probably did not know that. I did not know that until I learned this years ago, but your taxes get taken out automatically because of something that passed in 1943, because they realized, and this is just common sense, but I can take more from you if I take it before you actually see the real amount. See, if you got a check and that check was your regular pay stub and it was $2,400 for a week, you'd be like, man, this is awesome, fired up. And then I'm like, all right, John, like, you got to pay your taxes this week. Or you have to save your money till the end of the year, which we know most people aren't very good with their money. Save your money till the end of the year, and you owe us, 33, 36, 40, whatever the percentage is. So they said, instead of doing that, people are going to throw a fit if we actually make them pay that. So why don't we just take it out automatically? So in 1943, that was passed. Employees have the worst tax situation. Here's what Robert Kiyosaki says about the employee quadrant tax situation. He says, the harder you work, the more you make, and the more they take. The misconception here with the employee quadrant is that it is safe and secure, but here's the deal. If someone else controls your income, that company can go under, they can go bankrupt, they can close, your boss can fire you, you can get replaced, or they can eliminate your job. I've heard, I can't even tell you how many stories of people that were amazing at what they did, making great money as far as employee goes, and they lost their job like that, completely unexpectedly. A gal named Sarah that I actually just met with for it was a meeting that I was doing, and I met with her, and she has been in car sales for over 7 or 8 years, and she is one of their absolute top performers, sales trainer, just absolutely crushing it. Boss came into the office like shortly before Christmas of 2022, comes into the office, lets her know, hey, you need to sit down with us. We've eliminated your position, and she was gone. Worked with them for years and years and years, was not only just a top performer, but she actually trained some of their sales staff. Another gal that was a patient of mine when I was doing weight loss coaching, I forget her first name completely. I had it written down somewhere because the story impacted me so deeply, but she was working in the same exact field with ATM companies, like the companies that actually go place ATMs at a location at a bank. She was working with the manufacturer. She worked with that manufacturer, with that same exact company, for over 30 years. She was with the same company for 30 years and got fired with absolutely no notice. Came into my office, was absolutely just a complete mess, crying, had no clue what she was going to do because her income stream was completely controlled by someone else. I could go on and on. I've heard so many stories just like these, but I'm going to move on to the next quadrant, the next way that you can make money out of the 4 ways. So moving on to the S quadrant, or the self-employed solopreneur specialist. This is someone like maybe a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, or an orthodontist. And I know, yes, those are different kinds of doctors, but obviously whenever I hear doctor, I still think medical doctor or chiropractor or something along those lines. But so this is someone who's highly specialized in what they do. They probably went to a lot of schooling to learn what they do, and they make decent money. These people can make, sometimes upwards of $400,000 a year, maybe even more depending on the size of their practice or their business. Now, their money is made by trading a service or selling a product, and they might say things like, if you want something done right, do it yourself. Their core values are really going to be independence, and many people say things like, I'm sure you've heard this, or you might have thought this or done this in the past, I'm going to quit my job and go out and start my own thing, and then they make the transition from the E quadrant to the S quadrant. Now, this is a little bit better. You can still make more money, but generally speaking, these people work a lot more hours than most employees, and they have very little true freedom in their life. The limitations and challenges these people face might be that they're usually limited by the fact that no one can do what they do as well as they do it, and oftentimes people in the S quadrant do not work well with teams. Sometimes they do, but oftentimes they don't work well with teams because they think they're the smartest person in the room, and they kind of have a little bit of an ego issue. That's not always the case, but it is something that can be a challenge for the S quadrant because they're so good at what they do. They're so highly specialized that they might kind of look down on other people that are just doing a regular type of task. So oftentimes this person enjoys being the smartest person in the room or the smartest person within their business. They get kind of intimidated sometimes by people coming into their business that have higher level skill sets than they do. Not 100% of the time, but this is just kind of what Kiyosaki teaches when it comes to these 4 quadrants. So if one of their employees is better than them or smarter than them or more talented in some way, that may be a good thing, or they may view that as a threat because they're the business owner and that person can learn exactly what they're doing and go out and start their own business. Now, if it's not something like a doctor or something that's, a ton of schooling, a lawyer, a lot of the times people in the self-employed quadrant will train their competition unknowingly. So example, let's say that I owned a lawn care business. It was called, Jesse's Lawn Care. And I bring a new guy on and he's super sharp, crazy ambitious, really, really, really hungry student, wants to learn exactly how we do everything. I'm just thinking, man, I got a great employee. Then I notice, okay, he's actually starting to build his own customer base. Now he becomes my competition. And what he can do is he can go tell my customers, I've learned exactly what this guy does. I can do the same exact thing for $5 less per cut on your lawn. So you'll save money, get an even better service. In fact, I don't just know what he does. I've improved on his process, so I can go ahead and cut your lawn for $5 less per time. So now I brought a team member in. The guy was more ambitious than I realized. He goes out and starts his own thing. He leaves me, and now I'm losing my customers. So there's some of the limitations and challenges these guys face. Also, the tax situation, it's a little bit better than the employee quadrant, but you still pay some pretty hefty taxes. This is due to something called the 86 tax reform. And this was passed back in 1986, thus the name 86 tax reform. But they basically took away, they being the federal government, they took away a lot of the benefits and the advantages of being an S-type business owner. So the majority of the benefits for people in the S quadrant, for specialists, for doctors, for lawyers, small business owners, etc., they kind of disappeared. So they actually end up paying some of the highest tax percentages nowadays, and they get taxed after they bring their income in. So they have to be extremely discipline with their finances because they have to pay at the end of the year, not all at once. Generally speaking, unless they make a ridiculous amount of money, then you can pay quarterly or even, sometimes monthly taxes in very unique situations. But the misconception here is that I have freedom because I'm self-employed, when the reality is that really you are in bondage. So Kiyosaki says a lot of people will think, well, I own a business, when in reality the business owns them. In a very real way, the S can sometimes stand for slavery because you don't really own your business tends to own you. I cannot tell you how many self-employed people that I know that work crazy hours. They're up before everyone else. They're in the office first. They're in the office last. They're turning the lights on. They're shutting things off. They're putting the equipment in the truck at the beginning of the day. They're taking it out at the end of the day. They work their guts out all the time. They have very little freedom. And if they take a vacation, generally speaking, their income stops. It's just a very rough situation to be in. Now, if you enjoy the freedom in your schedule and you really, really, really don't want to work a job, there can be a lot of benefits to it. I'm not putting it down by any means, but there is a huge difference between that and what we're going to talk about next with the other side, the right side of the quadrant, starting with the B quadrant, or the big business quadrant. Now, this person, their money is made by leveraging automated or plug-and-play systems. Think about franchises or things like McDonald's where they have systems in place. Now, I think all of us have made a hamburger before that tastes better than anything and pretty much everything that you can buy at McDonald's. And even though I'm a total health nut, I still think McDonald's tastes good depending on what you get on the item. That is probably my go-to place to get just a large black iced coffee for like 99 cents with the McDonald's app, of course, because I got to save money. But That's probably one of my go-to places for coffee, but they really don't make that high quality of food. But if you're looking to make money with a burger, they have the best burger in the world. That's because of their system. So the difference between a B quadrant and an S quadrant business owner, or someone that owns a company or runs a company in the B quadrant, versus the S quadrant. So moving from the left side of the quadrant, the E and the S, to the right side, the B and the I, is that in an S business, you work for your business, where in a B business, your business works for you. So really, if you're not sure exactly, so I own a pretty large company, we do pretty well, which quadrant am I in? Kiyosaki says if you cannot step away from your business for at least 6 months minimum without a cash flow interruption, without things changing in your business, then you have an S business, not a B business. You can think that you have as much freedom as you want to, but according to really how this works, if you cannot step away from your business and continue to get cash flow month after month after month, see, because true B types can actually walk away from their business for months and years, and almost completely permanently, with no change to their income or lifestyle. Again, I have friends that work, an hour a day, 2 hours a day, and their income continues to not even, it doesn't just come in, but it actually increases because they built a full passive income business. They've built a pipeline of money, meaning the money flows constantly, versus bucket carrying, where I have to actually go and do a service or trade a task. Voice crack there, but basically they have a pipeline where the money comes in all the time. The vocabulary used by this kind of person, instead of saying I'm looking for a safe, secure job with good benefits, or if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself, they think more along the lines of, and use the verbiage of, I'm looking for the best people to join my team. So while an S person might want to be the absolute best at what he or she does, they want to be the best in their field, they want to be the go-to for everybody, the B quadrant person really wants to build a team of people who are the best or better at what they do than the business owner, because if they can do that, they can actually free up their time, because people don't need them to keep the company running. So really, this person that owns a B-type business or a big business wants to surround themselves with people that are better than they are in their specific fields. So whatever position I need someone to actually come into, so if I need a brand new position hired out for the company, I want to make sure that person is as good as or better than I am at that skill, because the core values of the B type, unlike any other quadrant, is that they want to focus on wealth building. So unlike the active income, the S and the E, where I trade time for money or I sell a product or a service, by the way, if you're in sales of any sort and you work for another company, even if you're 1099, you are technically an S quadrant rather than an employee, unless they actually have you on, salary or payroll, so to speak, and you don't get commission, in which case, please go find a commission-only sales job if you want to stay in sales, because you will make way more money. But anyway, the core values of this person is wealth building. Limitations and challenges for this type of person is that it does take more time to get over into the B quadrant. It's not something immediate. Unlike employee, I can go out and get a new job probably tomorrow. I could start a self-employed business, go buy some lawnmowers, I don't know why I'm stuck on the lawnmower thing, but I could start a small self-employed business pretty quickly, depending on what it was. If it was service-based, I could start it up extremely fast, go drum up some customer sales, and I could get going. But the B-type does take some time. But here, as a little side note, here's what I'm going to really be talking about in episode 5. It takes a completely different skill set and education than we got in school to be a B-type, or the next quadrant, an I-type, which is an investor. It takes a completely different skill set than we got in school. I'll talk more about this in episode 5, because anyone can learn these skills, and anyone can actually get the education necessary themselves. They can learn it on their own. They don't have to go back to school, get a master's degree in business, none of that nonsense. They can teach themselves everything they need to know and learn from others that have the fruit on the tree to actually move over into the right side, or the passive income side of the quadrant. So lastly, with the B quadrant, the tax situation, these people can literally make millions and millions of dollars and pay a very small percentage of tax legally, because the tax laws favor large businesses, or businesses that generate tons of cash flow. They favor large businesses because of the amount of commerce they actually bring into and stimulate into the economy. So the misconception here is that there's a common belief by a lot of people in the E and the S quadrant, and you heard this. I don't really care where you stand with Trump. We're not here to discuss politics, but there were so many people that talked about how dishonest Trump was and how he made millions of dollars and billions of dollars and didn't even pay taxes and blah, 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 and he barely paid anything. The tax codes in that area, you can legally do that. There's a common misbelief by people as self-employed or employees, people that trade time for money, that make their income actively, which is well over 90% of people, 95% of people. They believe these people are dishonest, and somehow cheating with their taxes and that they should be forced to pay more, and you hear garbage like this on the media. The tax laws are set up to favor that side of the cash flow quadrant that Kiyosaki talks about. So it's not that they're being dishonest or somehow shady, or they're moving money into private accounts on different islands out of the country. They're not necessarily doing that kind of stuff. Do some of them do that? Absolutely. There's dishonest people in every field and every type of business model, but the tax laws are set up to favor them. So last thing, and then I'm going to kind of give you a plug for what I'll talk about episode 5. And if that episode is already out at the time of you listening to this, be sure to hit play on that one immediately after this, because it kind of really brings all this together. But lastly, we have the I quadrant, or the investor. This is someone that uses money to make money, and they're going to use vocabulary, language, and lingo like, what's my ROI, return on investment? Can I see the company's financials? They're going to have these sort of intelligent financial questions, and their core values are really financial freedom. The investor loves the idea of his money working for him rather than him having to actually go out and work for his money. So the investor is someone that's looking to make money so they can spoon it off into other investments that can become assets and generate cash flow. So there's a difference here in the way that people spend money on the left side versus the right side of the quadrant. So employees and self-employed versus B-type business owners and investors. Most people on the employee side have the belief that money this is a total side note, but they believe that money has the purpose of, I make money and I buy stuff that I want to buy. Money equals freedom. I'll talk more about this in the next episode, but money is not for you to go spend on the stuff you want. That's not why you make money. People who are wealthy make money, and generally speaking, they make money in the B quadrant, in the large business or big business quadrant, and they spoon that off to investments into the I quadrant, and then they take that money that they just made from those investments, the profit, the capital gains, whatever it is, they reallocate that into some sort of business venture, and then they take the cash flow that generates and put it back in the investment quadrant. And then eventually they just put more and more and more and more money into businesses and more investments. And they just continue this positive, virtuous cycle of make money, invest money, make money, invest money, make money, invest money. And this is all set up to favor them by the tax law. So they don't think I'm going to go make money so I can go out and buy a Lamborghini. That's left side of the quadrant thinking. That's middle class thinking. That's I make money, I go buy something immediately. They think, how can I make money to actually buy myself freedom in the future? The limitations and challenge, though, of the investor quadrant are really that in order to be a qualified investor, and I'm not talking about, stocks and mutual funds and bonds, because Kiyosaki really says that that's not necessarily investing, because it's not what he qualifies an investor as. So you can do that. I'm not hating on any of those things, but they're not the safest investments that you can make. But in order to really be a qualified investor, you need to be able to lose $250,000 without it affecting your lunch plan. So basically, you need to be able to just put in $250,000 into a deal and something goes bad and you lose money and you're like, man, that sucks. We're still going out to lunch. Like it really can't affect you. You cannot let it ruffle your feathers, because you have to have so much money to actually play this game like it should be played. If you're a legitimate investor that, if you're playing small and just doing day trading and, buy low, sell high and that sort of stuff, mutual funds, like I said, bonds, that's still considered quote-unquote investing, but it's really not what he's talking about when he says you are an investor. Lastly, the tax code for this is probably the absolute best one, but it is 100% legal for someone in this quadrant if they know what they're doing and if they understand the tax laws. If their accountant is really doing things great and they really understand the ins and outs, they can literally make multi-millions of dollars and pay next to nothing, almost zero. I've heard some people say zero. I'm not going to make that claim, but almost zero in taxes because of the way things are worked and because of where you can move money to. And there's laws that, again, allow that to happen. And there's nothing wrong with that, because these are just the 4 different ways of making money. But again, there's a common belief by people on the left side of the quadrant making active income, trading a service or selling a product or trading time for money. They think that these people are dishonest because they make so much money and oftentimes pay so little in taxes. It's just the way things are set up. Now, here's my question for you. In the next episode, I'll be discussing exactly what it takes to go from the left side, working actively, trading time for money, trading a service, selling a product for income, over to the right side of the quadrant, which again is part of the journey of the show, is me documenting this journey. So I'm sharing this information with you. So if you would like to, you can take that journey with me as well. I'm teaching you what I'm learning along this journey, every step of the journey, every step of the path that I take, and I notice something new and I learn something new, or something that I've learned in the past that has now come up, and I'm like, yeah, I should teach them that because that was so impactful to me. That's what I'm doing here by giving you episodes 4 and 5. And then episode 6, We're going to talk about marshmallows, so be sure to check that out. But basically, I want you to examine what you're doing right now and ask yourself, based on my future plans, where I want to go, the life that I would really like to have. Will what I'm doing now get me the results I really want in life? Again, going back to episode 3, the last episode, define what you want, learn from someone who's done it, go do what they did and get the results that they have in their life. Is what I'm doing right now going to actually get me the results that I want? Because many times people get frustrated in this journey, and instead of switching from active income to passive income, from working a job to owning a business to actually getting into the B quadrant or the I quadrant, instead of taking the time and the hard work and educating themselves and collecting the skills that they'll need to do that with their life, they get frustrated and fed up with the results they're currently getting. And instead of changing quadrants, what they really want to do is change lifestyles entirely. Instead of doing that, they go switch jobs, or they start a new business, or I'm going back to college. So they do more of what did not work the first time. Hear me when I say this. If it did not work the first time, doing more of what did not work is not going to somehow automatically one day just, I've done this now for 10 years and I chose to do it for 11 and now it started working. If what you're doing currently to pay bills, if you're not happy with if it's not giving you the lifestyle that you want, then it's probably not that you need to go get a different job or start a different business model. If you want a life where you only have to work an hour a day, let's say 5 to 10 hours a week, and make money over and over and over and over and over again, then you want a life on the right side of the quadrant. So your homework, outside of watching The Matrix, of course, if you have not watched that yet, is to hit play on episode number 5 and learn about what passive income really is, what it looks like, and how some people are able to develop income that does not require their time. What skill sets does it take? What character traits? What type of people do that? And how can I learn to become that type of person? If you want more information on the subject of the cash flow quadrant and the 4 different ways of making money, you can check out these 3 books, all by the author Robert Kiyosaki. So number 1 is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a classic, a must-read. Number 2 is the cash flow quadrant. And number 3 is Business of the 21st Century. Talk to you in episode 5.